All right. So while we're waiting to start, if you can all please just put your name, your organization, and where you are located today in the chat. That would be great for all of us to see. We see Hobbs, we see CNM, Albuquerque Schools, Boys and Girls Club, NMSU, STEM Outreach Center, Santa Fe, New Mexico. RGC in Albuquerque, Las Lunas Public Schools, Boys and Girls Club, San Juan County, 21st Century, Heritage Academy in Albuquerque, RGC Albuquerque. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. We have about 133 people registered, and right now I see about 60 in the room with us. We will get started because we have a very tight schedule this morning. So I want to welcome everyone to this out of school time roundtable. It's really to honor the Lights on After School day that we had yesterday across the state and the nation. And we usually do the Lights on After School little symbol to highlight the important program that takes part between 3 and 6 p.m. or during the summer. It could be a teen center. It can also be before school. And as the NMOS, the New Mexico Out of School Time Network, it's our mission and vision that every child in New Mexico has access to quality out of school time, regardless of zip code and income. So my name is Mai Sagbakken, and I serve as the Executive Director of the New Mexico Out of School Time Network. And it's my pleasure to host this roundtable today in partnership with Lieutenant Governor Javi Morales. We've done quite a few of these now during the last few years. And joining me today is also Ian Gates, the NMOS Special Projects Coordinator. He will assist you with any technical issues you might have today. We also have Tara Elder with Social Legends, who will help monitor the chat. We encourage you to put questions in the chat as the speakers are presenting today. And we will make sure your comments and questions reach our speakers as we move through the sessions. And to get started, we mentioned in the beginning for all of you to put your name and your organization and where you are located in the state so we can see who are with us this morning. We will begin with the Attorney General, Raul Torres, who will discuss efforts and strategies to present funding for 21st Century Community Learning Centers in New Mexico. We are forever grateful for the efforts that his office made in partnership with other attorney generals across the country to preserve funding for this critical program in our state. We have a pretty rich agenda ahead of us. After the Attorney General, Jen Reinhardt from the After School Alliance will share insights from the newly released 2025 America After 3 p.m. report, and she will highlight national and statewide data on unmet demand, parent satisfaction, and access in rural and tribal communities. We will then hear from Connor Hicks, policy analyst with the Legislative Education Study Committee, who will present findings and policy recommendations from the latest evaluation of out-of-school time programming done by his office and team in New Mexico. And finally, we'll wrap up a panel of out-of-school time providers and parents who will reflect back what they have heard and seen from the presenters, and what they may add or discuss as a panel. And then at the end, if we have time, we'll have some breakout Zoom sessions to gather feedback from all of you on the ideas of expansion of out-of-school time across the state. So as you will hear, the presentations today are focused on out-of-school time. We all are here gathered as a New Mexico community to support out-of-school time. We'll talk about assets and gaps. You will also hear, which I think is critical today, that there's a strong bipartisan support for out of school time or after school. The well-being of children and youth is important for all parents in New Mexico, regardless of who you voted for. So we are here as a connected community today, focused on what we can do and what we need to do for children and youth across our state, for them to stay safe, engaged, healthy, and thriving. And with no further ado, I will pass it on to my co-host and what do we say? Main champion. He's our main champion for out of school time and has been for several years. So it's my honor to introduce Lieutenant Governor Javi Morales to make some opening remarks. Welcome. I see you outside. Where are you today?
Thank you so much, Maya, and thank you to the whole network for all the work that you've done, for putting New Mexico on the map when it comes to out of school time, after school programming. And today, where I'm in Albuquerque at an outdoor recreation complex that youth, adults utilize here at Los Altos Park, and talking about out of school time and engagement opportunities. We were having some discussions how we can further enhance that. Because myself as an educator, I'm extremely grateful for the work, Maya, that you continually do and the work that's done by the whole network to make sure that we can recognize that education comes at all levels. Education comes in all forms and fashions. And I think when we talk about this renewed push for literacy and academic achievement, I think that's great. But not to forget the aspect of student engagement. And the student engagement piece is absolutely instrumental to help surpass achievement and proficiency marks. That's why I'm such a big believer, because as many of you know, that's my story. It wasn't the academics, the math, the reading that really inspired me to continue to learn. It was the activities. It was the opportunity to engage with my friends, which ultimately is much of the uses that I'm able to do in the state Senate, helping to make sure that we have 42 senators who may not have all the same opinions, but can do it in a way that's collaborative, teamwork. At the end of the day, wanting the best possible results that we can possibly have. Those are the lessons that we're teaching when it comes to out of school time, after school opportunities, and even before school opportunities. We know from the 3 to 6 p.m. hour why it's so important that we keep kids safe, that we do all that we can to make sure that families are able to get to work, they're able to do all the things that are necessary. And just this last week, you've seen some of the messaging, some of the press releases that have been out there that has really put New Mexico on the map once again, just as we have for out of school time funding, is when we are offering free childcare. I think that's important because that adds to the workforce and what's being done. But it's important when we do that we have programs that are in place that are being assisted with the proper funding and the proper resources to make it successful. So in the state, we're doing a lot of good things. And I think that was highlighted with the opportunity when we brought every lieutenant governor across the country to hear what is happening in New Mexico. We heard the presentations, we shared how New Mexico is invested in overall quality of life for children. And I know that there's some rankings that are out there that show that, we can improve, we can always improve. But this is the opportunity and the way that we make those improvements by investing in programs like that. None of this could be possible without our many champions across the whole state. The champions that are working so hard to ensure that families know when their children are dropped off, that they're cared for, they're educated, and they're loved. It's no secret that we have a lot of issues that are taking place at the national level. A lot of cuts that sometimes just don't make any sense to me. And when we talk specifically with students with disabilities and the programs that are needed there, in New Mexico, we're always going to make sure that we stand behind our students, stand behind our families, and to weather any storm of financial cuts or program cuts that may be proposed, that we're going to stay strong. And I think that we have a true champion with our Attorney General who's going to be speaking next. And I'm so glad to have Attorney General Roel Torres to be a part of this and to be a champion to make sure that we're going to protect families across the state of New Mexico. That's what it takes, not only from the political spectrum and the work that we do in government, but from the perspective of local communities and local programming. I'm forever grateful that one of the initiatives that I took as Lieutenant Governor 7 years ago was to work closely with the out of school time, the New Mexico program and network that's in place that really has made such a difference for me, and I think made a difference for families across the state. So I appreciate you allowing me to share my words, share some of my stories, and then do it from a place that this weekend will continually engage more young students to be involved in community and to have the opportunities to do what it is they love to do while they're learning. So thank you, Mai. Thank you for all of you who have joined today. And I hope that this discussion that is revolved around kindness, compassion, and love is remembered. Because at the end of the day, even though some may think that it's soft and you're not going to survive, that's just the opposite. Kindness, compassion, and love is the most powerful things that we can demonstrate to one another. And that being the theme of this year's conference. Thank you. I think you're on mute, Mai.
I am on mute. Thank you so much for everybody's texting me. You're on mute. Thank you so much for those words and kind words. And I cannot agree more. Kindness, compassion, and love. And just to see in the outdoors kind of makes me feel a lot more relaxed in this roundtable, because this is supposed to be a roundtable and we wanted to do it in person, but we realized the timing, and if we want to reach the whole state is difficult. But you being outdoors kind of makes me feel like we have an in-person event. So thank you for doing that. And also, Lieutenant Governor, if you are going to stay on, raise your hand if you want to have, make some comments after the other presentations. So we want to pull you back in if you want to make additional comments or have questions. So thank you again for being with us this morning. And with that, we're going to move over to our first speaker as part of the presentations today. And that is the Attorney General Raul Torres, who filed a lawsuit in July to stop the U.S. Department of Education from unlawfully withholding $6 billion in critical education funding. And 45 million of that was slated for New Mexico schools, and 21st Century Learning Communities was part of that potential withholding of funds. And we just had questions as to what actually happened. And because we know there was a lawsuit, but I also know there was collaboration with other attorney generals. So we are here to thank you, number one, for your efforts to restore the funding. This is supporting 10,000 students in New Mexico and their parents and families and communities. But if you would like to share, your interest and your passion for restoring this funding, but also what happened or how was it done?
Sure. Well, thanks first, Mai, for including me today, and for everyone in the Out of School Time Network. I also want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for his kind words. I am a little jealous that I have to be here in the office to go over the latest lawsuits, and he gets to be out at Los Altos Park. But it's good to see him out in the community. I will start by saying that of all of the various lawsuits that we've had to initiate over the last several months, this lawsuit was not just important to me, as the chief legal officer in the state, but as more importantly, as the son of a public school teacher here in Albuquerque. My mom retired from Manzano High School. She worked at Jefferson Middle School. She worked in a variety of different capacities. And she always worked very hard to make her classroom a place where some of the kids that maybe didn't have as many resources or were new immigrants to the country and to the community, they found a home. And she would often talk to me about the importance of everything that happens outside of the classroom, all of the family support that they needed, whether or not they had enough food, whether or not they had adequate clothing, whether or not they had a caring adult and mentorship and tutoring, and all of the work that I know that the people on this call and as part of your network contribute to each and every day. So it was a particularly important thing for me to join and participate in leading the lawsuit against the Department of Education for the proposed cuts. I will also say that it is one of the things that we are proudest of in terms of accomplishments that we can really point to the restoration of that funding. Unfortunately, we haven't been as successful in some of the other legal actions that we've taken and some of the other unilateral cuts that we've seen in various federal agencies. But this is something that we are particularly proud of, and hopefully through our sort of dedication and our willingness to engage in that, courtroom battle, that this is at least something that we can put behind us and get back to supporting the important work that everyone here does every day. One of the things that I will say, though, that I am continuing, I continue to be concerned about, especially during the shutdown, is the way in which this has been exploited as an opportunity to accelerate furloughs, cuts, and turning off the lights in various programs that are run through the Department of Education. So we're keeping a close eye on that. We have to wait and see how the shutdown is resolved and what cuts have been sort of implemented, and sort of transition into more permanent restrictions on funding and programs. The other thing that I want to alert your members to, because I do think you have a very powerful voice in Santa Fe in the legislature and with policymakers like the lieutenant governor and others, is the dramatic need for increased both resources but also new authority for the New Mexico Department of Justice. You can speak, I think, more clearly than anyone as to why it's an imperative that we continue to invest in our litigation capacity here. This is something that my predecessors, frankly, didn't have to push for, and didn't really need to have a dedicated team that was focused on pushing back against cuts at the federal level, because it just was not a dynamic that we saw to the same extent. And so it's the restoration of those $45 million and the continuing support for those programs that I think will really crystallize and give real world examples for what it means to make investments in our agency. But beyond that, one of the things that we've seen at the Department of Education, and again is accelerating through the shutdown, is the dismantling of certain authorities that have lived inside the Department of Education, specifically the Civil Rights Division there, which, as you know, was focused on making sure that we had adequate resources for children with disabilities, for English language learners, for kids that maybe weren't getting the kinds of resources and supports that they needed to flourish in their communities. A lot of that protection is being stripped away because the current administration has decided that they no longer want to prioritize civil rights enforcement. And because of that, it really shines a light on a deficiency in state law. My agency does not actually have direct state level statutory authority to engage in civil rights cases. Now, that's something that we tried to remedy a few years ago. And unfortunately, the governor pocket vetoed that legislation. We intend to bring that issue back to the legislature, and it would add a lot to the public debate over that issue to have teachers and the folks who are working in your network elevate the conversation about why it's necessary. If the U.S. Department of Education is no longer going to be in the business of safeguarding the civil rights of students in this country, then the New Mexico Department of Justice ought to have that ability and that authority. I know it's a complicated question, but the way to really think about it is, as the federal government steps back from its historic role in safeguarding these resources and safeguarding equal opportunity for everybody, it's important for state level agencies like ours to be able to step in and fill the void. I don't think that's something that the legislature has fully understood or come to grips with yet, but it's incredibly important for people who have benefited from the work that we've engaged in, like you, to step up and give testimonials and examples of why it's important for this agency to continue having the funding that it needs, but more importantly, to have new authority to engage in this kind of work. Because as everyone here knows, we've made a lot of progress. We've increased funding. We've done important work in this state, but we still have a long, long way to go to make sure that all our kids have what they need to succeed and thrive in the world. So that's just a sort of the opening that I would like to present to this group, because I think it's incredibly important for you to understand what our priorities are going to be in the upcoming legislative session and how it relates to the work that you do. But again, thank you for including me in the conversation and inviting me to participate in this important debate today.
Yeah, and thank you for your in-depth understanding about what's happening with the education field. That is something that I really appreciate, and for educating me and maybe the rest of us about that role that you and your office can play in the absence of the federal oversight. That's something that I had not really thought about. So that is something that I would like to understand better and learn more about. But I really appreciate you bringing that up for all of us, because this, even the protection of students with disabilities in the after school arena is equally important as in school. So I think those protections apply whether you're in school or out of school. So a partnership with you around that to better understand what that means would be really important for the future. I also wondered, in terms of the success of this particular lawsuit, you worked with, I believe, 22 other states, or was it a total of 22 other states?
Yeah.
And how important was that for the success, that you actually partnered with other states to move this forward?
Yeah, it's been incredibly important to give this group sort of a broader sort of context on the work that we do collectively. The Democratic attorneys general in the middle of 2024, while the election was still underway or the campaigns were still underway for president, we started to plan in anticipation of what we thought might be the sort of the blueprint for a second Trump administration, and was outlined in Project 2025. And so we started meeting on a regular basis, our litigators and litigation teams all over the country. And so we were prepared to take pretty assertive legal action in response to a number of issues. Now, there are things that we didn't anticipate sort of rising to the top of that agenda. I, for example, didn't foresee targeting after-school programs and summer school programs as being a priority for the incoming administration based on what I was hearing in the campaign. But we certainly had the working groups put together, so we were able to respond to that pretty quickly. One of the things that I think it's important for everyone who has sort of witnessed that work here in New Mexico to understand is there have been shifts at the national level at the Supreme Court, and not to get bogged down in the sort of the legal technicalities, but one of the things that the Supreme Court did about 6 months ago is to eliminate what was called universal injunctions. And the impact of that means that only those states who participate in litigation and only those states who are represented by this coalition will have the benefit of temporary restraining orders or legal orders that seek to restore these types of funds. And so if a lawsuit is filed now, and for example, the chief legal officer in the state of New Mexico declines to participate in that lawsuit, even if the parties prevail in California or Rhode Island or New York or other places, you won't be covered in the state of New Mexico unless someone in this agency has made an affirmative decision to participate in those lawsuits. And that's a big shift, right? But in the past, we used to have the benefit of nationwide injunctions that would have been issued by a district court in another part of the country, and that would have stopped the practice across the entire country. Well, now it's more important than ever that you have attorneys general who are committed to trying to restore programmatic funding or to safeguard these particular powers and duties, because if we don't have that, if we don't join these lawsuits, we can't benefit anymore from a nationwide order that would have been issued from a district court. And so that makes the work very important in terms of making sure that we stay on top of all the litigation. We've filed about 35 lawsuits against the administration at this point, and we're only 9 or 10 months in. And so I would imagine that by the time we're done, it will be well above maybe 150 or 200. And that takes there's a lot of resources that goes into that, gathering information, gathering facts, participating in the pleading stages in these lawsuits. So it's complicated work, it's hard work, but it's absolutely necessary, as I think people on this call recognize.
One last question. So is there a way that this network with all our community providers and schools across the state can do to support your team in this effort?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really appreciate it. And the most important thing that you can do, and this is for everyone on this call from whatever corner of the state that you're in, and frankly from across the ideological and political spectrum, the appropriators in Santa Fe need to hear from your network about the direct connection between the legal work that we do and the restoration of programmatic funds. Because when we're having a debate about how much money to invest in our agency, to give you an example, other states in the country invested 5, 10, 15, 20, even $25 million in their in the agencies, in the AG's office. The executive recommendation the last time we went before appropriators was to increase our budget by $700,000, which is when all things are said and done, that's a couple of litigators and a paralegal, right? And so one of the head of our impact unit who's participating in the call, Anjana Samant, will tell you that that's not nearly enough, right? That's not nearly enough money, because with each new lawsuit, we have to keep on top of the lawsuits we've already filed, and then stay ahead of any new reductions to programmatic funding that may impact communities in a variety of different ways. And so when I go in front of appropriators and say, please, please, my agency needs more funding, oftentimes that gets disregarded, right? But when somebody from a local community calls the appropriator and says, look, the work they did led to the restoration of these programs that serves these kids, then it makes it real in a way for elected representatives that they don't really think about. When I'm asking for another full-time employee who's a lawyer who's going to file a lawsuit, they don't often connect that with dollars going back into the community to support kids. And it's people like you who can make that case, and you're from local communities and you have local relationships, and that matters a lot in the contest in Santa Fe to try and get new resources into the agency.
All right. Well, thank you for helping us understand that connection and the important role that you have played and your team, in helping preserving these programs. I know the battle is not over, because they just, I think last week, fired all the 21st century staff at the federal level. So of course we have concerns about who's going to actually give out the awards and the funding coming spring and fall. But that's to be known and learned as we move into the new year. I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing all this information that we normally don't learn much about. So I feel like I have a lot more questions. So we may just follow up with you in a separate time frame and meet with your staff and be partners in what's to come. Any last words to the network before we move on to our next speaker?
No, just thank you for what you do. Thank you for dedicating yourselves to trying to help our kids. As the Lieutenant Governor stated, it is much of what we see in terms of gains in the classroom and thriving communities don't just happen inside schools. It happens after hours. It happens in those times when working families need as much help and support as they can get. And so I really, not just as an elected official, but as a son of a public school teacher, I really do appreciate everything that you do.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I want to remind everyone too that in the, for the upcoming sessions, you can put some questions and comments in the chat if you want to send some, maybe, what do you call it? Like, what do you call this little thing? Emojis. Put them in the chat right now to appreciate our Attorney General for being here with us today. And then I know you're going to leave us. You have to leave at 10:30. So you only have 1 minute to move out of here. So, but then again, we will follow up with you. And I hope that things will not have to be in a place where we have to have more lawsuits, but we never know. And but we look forward to continue working with you.
I live for the day where I can get out of the business of suing the federal government. That would be great. So
Right.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us this morning. And we're going to move on to our next speaker, Jen Reinhardt. And I think after I introduce Jen, Ian, you can just move the spotlight off of me so we can enjoy Jen and her presentation. She is, I believe, in Washington, D.C., correct, Jen, this morning? Yes. And she is the, I have her title. She has a long title. She is the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Programs with the After School Alliance. And she's been there for many years, a steadfast champion and full insights of what is needed across the country, but they also focus on what's happening in each state. So she will today share the 2025 America After 3 p.m. data, which is really important for all of us in terms of grant writing, communicating with our legislators and policymakers and decision makers in our state as to what's happening not only nationally, but locally in New Mexico. And she also has some good news for us today. So I'm so excited to have you here, Jen. Thank you so much for making time to be with us on our network. I know you have been really busy because yesterday was Lights Up After School, and you have to squeeze in time for us. And I also know you have, like me, a little bit of a throat issue, but you still are here. So I'm going to just pass it on to you. And I know Ian is going to put up some slides.
Great. Thank you, Mai. It's a real pleasure to be here with everyone. In a lot of ways, I wish we were all together in a room, right? But I also understand the logistic challenges of all of that. And I wanted to just start off by kind of re-acknowledging the way Mai started off today, which is, this is kind of Lights On After School month, really. Many people celebrate on the designated day, which was yesterday. But lots of folks celebrate throughout the month. So I'm happy to be part of this like virtual celebration of Lights On together in New Mexico. If you participated in Lights On yesterday, would love for folks to like drop a line or two in the chat about your event and how things went, or if you have a link to anything about your event so that other folks can see. We have a great like social media wall on our webpage right now, which is really fun to just kind of browse through and see all the posts that have been coming through about events that were held yesterday. We know that there were, dozens of events in New Mexico, and we know there are many more events always than the ones we even know about, because many folks just do events. They don't necessarily register their events. I do want to say it is a real honor and also really hard to follow those two gentlemen, right? So to be here alongside Lieutenant Governor Morales and Attorney General Torres, they're both leaders among their peers. The Lieutenant Governor really paved the way for other Lieutenant Governors across the nation to engage on after school, and I've seen him at national conferences talking about the importance of after school. And we're incredibly grateful for the Attorney General's leadership back over the summer to really get the 21st Century Community Learning Center and other education funds that were being withheld restored. So, again, a real honor to be here with all of you and with them. And I wish that I went before them instead of after them, right? I do think the way that the Lieutenant Governor started off by really talking about like love and compassion and kindness, right? You actually can kind of see reflected here in the Lights On poster, which was created by a young person, right? So these same kind of core values around respect and responsibility and caring come through kind of at all levels, right? From elected officials down to young people who are seeing after school as a space for that. So just starting off with that kind of shared set of values. If we go to the next slide, I want to just take a moment here and acknowledge what Mai was just talking about, which is sort of the good news about New Mexico, right? In our reporting from America After 3 p.m., which I'll talk more about kind of what that is and the background on it, but want to start off with like the big news for New Mexico is that we found New Mexico to be a leading state for accessibility for after school. So this is great. It kind of reflects all the hard work that's been happening in the state, right? To make more programs available to more young people, the work that you all have been doing to help support quality after school opportunities for young people. The fact that New Mexico ranks number 3 in terms of accessibility in the nation is a reflection of stronger than average after school participation, including reaching a higher number of low-income young people in your programs. It also reflects the parents who don't say that it's difficult to find or afford programs, that's more parents in New Mexico are not saying that than we see in other places, right? So cost is a little bit less of an issue than in other states. And then just generally parents who agree that programs are readily available in their communities. So that's all good news. Not everything I'm going to share today like lines up perfectly with that good news story, right? Because as you just heard, there are certainly challenges that you're still facing, and I think you all would acknowledge that too, just knowing your own communities as well as you do. So you'll see a mix of like good news and bad news, but I want to start with kind of that really big picture good news for the state and acknowledgement of the the real hard work that folks have been doing. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide, we'll start to dig into some of the details here. This is just a little bit of background on America After 3 p.m. Our first study came out in 2004, and we've been doing studies like this roughly every 5 years since then. So this is our 5th edition of this critical resource for the field. And I think at the national level and even in your state, right, this could not come at a better time. Like we're poised to really try to help reach more young people, and certainly at the national level to help prevent any cuts to funding that would mean that even fewer young people are being served. So it's a really essential resource for the field, and in particular right now. On the next slide, you can see our methodology for the study. So the survey or the research is based on surveys of more than 30,000 households. The team that we partner with at Edge Research used a mix of both online surveys and surveys by phone and offered them in English and in Spanish. And in New Mexico, we surveyed 283 households, covering 462 young people's after school experiences. All of the data were collected earlier this year, from late January through most of April. And we had a great advisory board comprised of kind of leaders in the field and folks who work at the local level who helped advise us on both the questions that we asked and also how we share the findings. Okay, on the next slide, you can see we have 5 big takeaways for this year, and I'll dig into each one of these, but just very high level. We're going to talk about the demand for programs. We're going to talk about the parent recognition of the benefits of participating in programs. We're going to talk about some of the barriers to participation, and in particular, how those barriers are really impacting low and middle income families. And then we'll end on a high note around the parent support for after school, and in particular for public funding for after school. So on the next slide, you just see kind of that top level first finding. Really, the demand for after school programs is really tremendous. And on the next slide, this is national level data. So I should have said this at the beginning. I'm going to do a mix of national and New Mexico data, sometimes just to give you like a comparison point to like, how's New Mexico compared to the rest of the country? And in other times, I'm going to give you only national data. And that's because we don't have New Mexico specific data points for that, just based on the sample size from the state. And that's true for almost all states, not just for New Mexico. So this is the national level picture. The parents of about 30 million school-age kids want their child to participate in an after-school program, but the vast majority of those kids, about 23 million kids across the country, don't have access to programs. So that means that more than 3 in 4 young people whose parents say would be in programs are missing out on those opportunities. In New Mexico, on the next slide, you can see that after school is also in high demand in the state, that parents of more than 200,000 kids want after school programs. And the good news is like nearly 50,000 are able to access those programs. But the bad news is we still have a situation where like 3 in 4 young people in the state don't have access to the programs. On the next slide, this is national data. You can see that we find, I mentioned this earlier, that low and middle income families are the most likely to be missing out. So if the overall trend is 3 in 4 missing out, you can see that for higher income families, it's less than that. And for lower income families, the situation is even worse. And middle income families are also impacted. So it's kind of a situation where it's like high income families versus everyday families when it comes to participation. All right. Here you can see a little bit more about the unmet demand. So this is the group of those 155,000 kids that I mentioned earlier, whose parents say would be in a program if one were available to them. That's 56% today of the kids not in programs. Their parents are saying would be in programs if programs were available. And the slide shows you just kind of how that's changed over time. And unfortunately, I mean, this is like a good news, bad news situation, right? In part, we want to generate more demand for programs. We want greater parent recognition of the value of programs. We want parents to, want these opportunities for their kids. But then on the flip side of that, we want to actually be able to deliver on that as well. And what this shows is like, we're still struggling to deliver, right? We've built up a lot in terms of parent demand for programs. And now we need to really come through and help make sure that those programs are available to more young people across the state. At the national level, the number is around 50% unmet demand. So just to give you that little bit of perspective. The other thing that I'll say on this slide, which isn't reflected here, but just sort of additional national context, we do see that children of color have even higher levels of unmet demand at the national level. And that's true for Black children, for Hispanic children, and also for Native American children. Okay, so let's turn to finding number 2, where we're going to dig into kind of what's driving this demand, as I mentioned. So on the next slide, you can see that when we asked parents about how they see their kids benefiting from participation, and this is New Mexico specific, you can see that parents agree that after school programs are really keeping kids safe, helping kids build skills, improving school day attendance, which of course is critical right now, is basically everyone across the nation, and I'm sure in New Mexico are struggling to address issues around chronic absenteeism still. Also exciting kids about learning, which is connected to school day attendance, right? And also a new question that we asked this year is around giving kids opportunities to really engage in real life and like reduce their screen time, right? We know kids are spending a lot of time on screens, and parents see real value when it comes to after school, like getting kids engaged in all these other things and not spending so much time on their phones or other devices. And those numbers for New Mexico are all pretty in line, I would say, with what we see at the national level too. And then on the next slide, you can see that parents don't just see this as a thing that benefits kids, but they also see this as something that they benefit from personally. So 9 and 10 say that the after-school programs help them keep their jobs, help them be more productive in the hours after school, which we know if you're more productive in the hours after school supports like your family's bottom line and also supports kind of your employers and then ultimately your economy and even the state's bottom line overall. And it also helps them be less stressed, right? Which is not insignificant. Like mental health challenges are real for kids and for families right now. And so something that helps reduce stress is kind of a big deal. Okay, on the next slide, this is where we're going to pivot and just talk mostly about national data. So I'll go through this relatively quickly. Actually, I have some state data on this too, now that I think about it. So this is around the barriers to participation. And on the next slide, you can see that nationally, we find that the top barriers to participation are cost and access and availability. Like I can't find a program, I can't afford a program, or I have issues around either transportation or like the location just isn't convenient. It's not like it's way out of my way and I need to commute to work. Like all of those issues, right, are impacting kids and families. And then on the next slide, you can see that those same barriers basically hold true for New Mexico as well. That these issues around access, affordability, and availability are still challenges in the state. And then the next slide is national data. I'm just going to quickly mention, again, this is the point around kind of the barriers are also more prominent for low and middle income families. So you can see in most of the cases, the barriers for the dark blue, the low income, and the lighter bluish green middle income kind of cluster together. The only one that's different is like transportation is a little bit less of an issue for middle income families than it is for low income families, but in general, there is this divide between the barriers that are impacting kind of everyday families and higher income families. Okay, so turning to number 4, slide or finding number 4. This is where I'm going to have to just rely on national data. We asked families about a range of out of school time opportunities. So looking at things like organized sports, special lessons, clubs, that kind of thing. And we see that higher income families are not just more likely to be in after school, but they're also more likely to be in these other activities. And on the next slide, you can see that the spending when you compare higher income families with lower income families, those high income families are spending 9 times more on out of school time activities. And that is up from when we did the study back in 2020, pre-pandemic 2020, like right at the beginning of the year. We found that higher income families were spending 5 times more. So again, this gap has gotten even larger than it used to be. So we really have issues again around reaching kind of everyday, like working families out there who need these kinds of supports. If we go to the next slide, this is where you see, just looking at after school specifically, that again, higher income families are more than twice as likely to have access to programs than their lower income peers. Okay, and then our next slide. So this is 21st century. We've been talking a little bit about this already. It came up in a couple of instances so far. This is the federal funding for the 21st Century Community Learning Centers. And you can see that over time, that funding has really remained pretty stagnant. It grew very quickly early on in the history of 21st century, but that dates back to the 1990s, right? So we're going back a while there. But if we look in recent years, even beyond what you see here, it's remained pretty much static. And if we adjust that for inflation, it's actually decreased over time. And the funding you can see is like $138 million less than what we saw back in 2022 when we adjust for inflation. So that's certainly an important funding stream, again, in particular to help meet the needs of lower income families. And it's not keeping up. And so, it's hard for you all doing the work in the States, right, to keep up if we don't have public resources that are flowing in order to help you do that. Okay, so I'm going to pivot here and end on a high note. On the next slide, you can see that parents who have a child in an after-school program report a wide range of benefits from participation. And then on the next slide, you can also see that parents in New Mexico give their after-school programs really high marks. We added a new question to the survey this year that asks parents to rate the quality of their child's after-school program. Historically, we've used parent satisfaction as a proxy for quality, and parent satisfaction in New Mexico is incredibly high. But now you can also see that kind of a parent's quality rating score here is also really high. So we used a scale of 1 to 5, and parents, on average, it's more than a 4.5 in terms of what they see as the quality of the program that their child participates in. And then on the sidebar there, you can also see some of the things that parents say were most important in choosing their child's after-school program if they had a choice, right? Which is an issue for many parents, as we've already talked about. But here you can see things that are driving their choice are really around positive relationships with other kids. That goes back to kind of that screen time point, I think, again, in some ways. But knowledgeable and caring staff are also very high on the list, which makes sense, right? We know that knowledgeable, caring, committed staff are the #1 indicator of a quality program. And then things like supports for kids' mental well-being, which we've talked about already. So all of those are really important factors for parents when they're choosing a program. Okay, on the next slide, you can see we ask questions about particular aspects of the program and where they see where they're most satisfied. So this is a wide array of benefits that parents see for their kids. They want opportunities they want, and they're satisfied with opportunities for things like physical activity, reading and writing, getting outdoors, access to healthy snacks and meals, but also kind of those foundational skills that we talked about that, again, I think are like, what are the strengths of after school, right? You don't see parents talking so much about academics here, and certainly not about grades or test scores, but about these kinds of like supports that they know their kids need in order to ultimately go to school more, do better in school, be happy at school, like all of that. But even among higher, like high school youth, you can see that parents also see programs giving them an opportunity for college and career readiness as well. So parents really recognize and are satisfied with a wide array of benefits. Okay, and then on the next slide, we talked about this a little bit and it's come up already, is just kind of what's the parent support for public funding look like for after school programs in New Mexico? And you can see that support for funding is really high and growing and cuts across all of those kind of political affiliations that we track. So high levels of Democrats, independents, and Republicans are expressing support for after school opportunities. At the national level, we also see high support across like types of communities, rural, urban, suburban, different ethnicities, and any other cut of the data really that we can do at the national level. All right, and then I'll just go through this last thing quickly. So we have a section of the report that focuses on how the data can shape policy going forward. And on the next slide, you see some of the policy recommendations that are really designed to address some of the barriers that we talked about already, where we need more funding, we need to help address the barriers that parents are citing or keeping them from participating. We need to invest more in our after-school staff, right? It's clear that staff are key for quality, key to parents and families. And we know that we all have challenges around recruitment and retention, and we can do better to make sure that after school staff see themselves in like a profession that gives them a livable wage, that gives them the kind of benefits and supports that they need to stay in that role. Also designing programs that really help support the priorities of parents rather than like what funders think is most important right now, right? Let's listen to our parents and families and design programs around those needs. And then lastly, I'll just point you all to the website where you can find more, including an interactive data dashboard where you can pick New Mexico from the drop down, and then you can dig even more deeply into all of the data from the state. And you can also download that leading states report that I talked about earlier, which again puts New Mexico in the top 3 for accessibility for after school programs. So lots of good stuff on that webpage. All right, I'm going to stop talking and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jen, for that excellent presentation. I know there's been a lot of requests for data in the chat, and we just posted the link because I know you did not even present all the data, correct? There's more to it. And the whole purpose, I believe, for the After School Alliance existence is for them to make sure we have the data to advocate for after school and to support staff and parents. So this is really for all of you and all of us to use and to go through to better understand what's happening nationally and in our state, but to help our decision makers to also understand what's needed. Tara, would you summarize some of the comments in the chat for Jen?
Yes, primarily, I mean, a lot of people are really interested in that data, so it's great that they have the link. And I'm guessing they can access all of that data that you referenced from the website?
They can, yeah. And I think I saw a little bit in the chat even about someone asking about the survey questions themselves. And if you go to the webpage, that aa3pm.co, you can access what we call a top line, which shows you the individual questions we asked, as well as the national level responses. So if you wanted to know exact wording of questions, that's all there too.
And so some of the other comments are busing is our issue in the rural area, being a small school, and no supplies for 3 years. And then someone else states that they're in a city and also have the barrier of no busing. So whether it's obviously rural or in a city setting, that seems to be a common issue. And yeah, and multiple people have mentioned that here. Um, the transportation and then access to your data were the biggest, and then school budgets limiting purchases for school supplies. Funds are never enough.
I see one question too, Tara. Somebody asked if the children have been surveyed, the children and youth.
Oh, yes.
So we did not, this is a parent survey. We did have a group of youth that we did focus groups with in the design of the survey to get their input on like some of the items, you know, that like the response items for parents to respond to. There are some other surveys out there of young people. There was one that a group called Every Hour Counts, and I'll try and find the link, did a couple of years ago at this point. So there are a couple of those kind of projects, and our team actually has a whole project around youth engagement. And I can drop the link to that project in the chat too. So yeah, seeing how the data from parents match up with like what we know about young people's experiences is a great idea, and something that I think could even happen right in local communities and in the state.
Yeah, and I saw Ian just dropped a link to the workforce survey, Power of Us. That was a big deal, and I think it's being presented right now, the results. So that is really about the workforce in the youth development space. So that could be really interesting for all of you who are staff or directors or managers to take a look at. I am wondering if our Lieutenant Governor is still in the room and if he had any comments. Ian, can you spotlight him if he's still with us? I see Howie Morales. I don't know if he is with us. If not, we're gonna move on to Connor in a minute. But Jen, did you have any last comments to us as a network and what we can do to one of your first recommendations on the last slide was more funding. So maybe help us or help everyone in the room understand what their role is as a provider to help us increase funding for children and youth in our state.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, we work at the national level to help try and grow that federal investment that I talked about, the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program. We've seen that be under threat, right, from the withholding that happened this summer, the president's budget proposal, which eliminates funding for 21st Century altogether. And now Congress, of course, where they can't agree on a budget for right now. The versions of the budget that we have seen from both houses in Congress do restore, like the funding for 21st Century remains. But as they continue to work through like these shutdown and issues and everything else, we need to keep sending messages. We need to keep showing up in places. Things like Lights On, right, really help like draw attention. Sharing this new report and the findings can be another great way that folks can, like, anytime you see something new that seems beneficial, like sharing it with anybody you know from your elected officials' offices. And I think that's true for the national level and for the state level, where you're also working, right, to grow more state funding. I know Mai and Ian have been focused on like increasing the state funding for after school too. So like taking every opportunity to really build relationships with your elected officials. And that can be as simple as just like remembering to send an email anytime there's some new like data that's either about your program specifically or about things happening in New Mexico or about things even happening nationally, and share that with your local, state, and federal officials. Because in the end, this does really come down to like relationships and people seeing that these kind of public funds matter at the local level, right? Like the closer you can get to like somebody's personal circle, right, the better to show the impact of funds like that. So just work on those relationships, reach out to us. We have a lot of tools on our website that can make that easier. And I know that the New Mexico network has those kinds of resources too. Site visits are huge, Ian, I just saw that. You know, Lights On is kind of a way to do site visits, but site visits can happen really any time of year, and in particular when federal and state officials are back like in their home communities is a great time to try and schedule those.
All right, Jen, thank you so much for making time to be with our network and our speakers, our communities and providers this morning. We so appreciate you because you are the expert on this particular study and the data that's come out this particular year. And one last question, so people understand, how often is this survey done?
Yeah, we generally do the survey every 5 years. So what you'll see, this is our like main report release, and then we have a series of special reports that will come out over the course of the next year. So we kind of get the data in a year, do the main release that same year, then we share a couple of special reports. We'll have one on summer. You noticed I didn't talk about summer in the report, and that not because it's not important, but because we're going to do a whole report with New Mexico specific data on that in the spring. And then over the summer next year, we'll do a STEM report. So the ways in which after school is supporting science, technology, engineering, and math. And then later next year, or maybe even into the following year, we'll do one that's specifically focused on health and well-being. So kind of that wide range of supports for young people's overall well-being. And then we'll start to gear up for the next round of surveys. But that, again, happens roughly every 5 years. So it would be like 2029-ish.
All right. Well, I get the sense on the chat that people really are appreciating this data because I think it's helping everyone, not only advocating for their own program, but like you said, for the whole state. So thank you so much for that detailed presentation. And as you all know, you can get the whole presentation and in the future more presentations at the After School Alliance website, and there's a link in the chat. So let's all do like a, if you go to the emoji on the heart on the bottom, you can do a heart if you really liked her presentation, or you can do a clap, let's all do, or you can do the lights on after school, whatever, do something for Jen in the after school spirit, because we always like to have a little bit of fun. Thank you, Jen. I'm going to let you go, and we're going to move on to Connor Hicks. And as you know, he has another very detailed interesting report to share with us this morning. Connor Hicks with the Legislative Education Study Committee. Welcome, Connor. We're so happy to have you here. And I think you moved to New Mexico like 2 years ago now.
Yes, that is correct. So I'm just under 2 years in this job and in New Mexico.
So he is still learning about
I am
our
indeed.
state. So whenever you have a chance, invite Connor to visit your program. That's my encouragement to all of you, so he can learn about what you do, the gaps and needs. But he's done a stellar job being so new to our state to understand the field out of school time. And he is here to present the study that you presented last week to LASC.
Yes, indeed.
So I'm going to hand it all over to you, Connor.
All right. Thank you so much, Mai. I'm going to drop a link in the chat here, which will take you to the report itself on the New Mexico Legislature's website. And there's no slides that I'll be sharing. It'll just be me talking for a bit, and I'll point out page numbers there as I talk. So good morning, everybody. I'm so honored to be with you all virtually this morning to discuss out of school time access here in New Mexico. My name is Connor L. Hicks. I serve as a policy analyst for the New Mexico Legislative Education Study Committee. We're a dedicated nonpartisan staff that supports all lawmakers here in Santa Fe who are responsible for setting our state budget and passing various laws around K-12 education. In addition to out of school time, I cover a policy block known as Education Support Services, which is best described as sort of wraparound services that students receive outside the classroom primarily. So that includes out of school time, but also we talk about school safety, school climate, school nutrition, a number of other topics. STEM education, for example. The STEM Innovation Network was a big priority of our committee last summer, and that was something I was involved with as well. I'd like to thank Mai and the NMOS team for inviting me to participate in this roundtable today and for their partnership on out-of-school time issues in our state. They've been really great thought partners as I've moved to New Mexico, learned about this place, and just the incredible work that's happening across our state. So with that, I'll just jump right in. And this is mostly the report that I gave last week to my own committee, the Legislative Education Study Committee, at our October hearing in Las Cruces. So out of school time, or OST programs, provide students with access to a broad range of academic and enrichment activities that support a well-rounded education. and whether the focus of that OST is to give students homework help, offer career exploration, provide students a safe environment after the school day, or engage them in physical activities, or something else entirely, OST programs are a key component of students' educational experiences. And so during the 2025 interim, LESC staff conducted a review of New Mexico's OST landscape with a focus on how legislative funding had been used in fiscal year 2025. Now, this review is not exhaustive, but it involved discussions with PED staff and program operators in school districts and charter schools, as well as site visits and virtual interviews to learn about the programming being offered in the state, both with school districts and charters, but also with community-based organizations. And so these conversations helped respond to research questions surrounding OST access, quality, and benefits. And again, I'd like to thank the Out of School Time Network for their help in pointing me in the right direction on these topics and really just giving me some great background information on it. So shifting gears, talking about our out of school time landscape here in New Mexico, our OST programs are primarily provided by a combination of school districts, charter schools, and community-based organizations, or CBOs. And in many cases, these entities will collaborate in offering programs, whether before or after the regular school day or during the summer. And these programs, however, are heavily concentrated in major urban areas like Albuquerque, Las Cruces, and Santa Fe, while many of New Mexico's rural and tribal communities do not have access to robust OST programs. And while funding can be a contributor to that lack of access, we also know, as we've seen in the chat today and previous conversations, additional barriers prevent these students in these communities from participating in these programs. So rural school districts and charter schools and OST stakeholders have cited transportation challenges, significant time to fill out grant applications in schools that don't have dedicated staff to fill out grants, and the lack of resources in a lot of these communities to support that sustained programming, whether it's supplies or staffing or whatever it might be. And before speaking more in depth about the programming offered in New Mexico, I just want to take a moment to review the recent legislative investments in New Mexico to support OST, as well as the federal funding used to support these efforts. And so if you'll turn to figure 1 on page 2 of my brief, you'll see a breakdown of funding for out of school time in the General Appropriation Act, the fancy name for the state budget, since fiscal year 2024. Now, in FY24, the legislature appropriated $20 million for OST programs, summer enrichment, and tutoring. This funding supported 78 sites throughout the state, with 40 being operated by school districts and charter schools, and the other 38 being operated primarily by CBOs. In FY25, the General Appropriation Act included $15 million for OST programs, of which $8.5 million had to be used specifically for high-impact tutoring. This change left just $6.5 million for non-tutoring OST programs. A PED commissioned evaluation by the Southwest Outreach Academic Research Center, or SOAR Evaluation and Policy Center in New Mexico State, reported that just under 7,000 students participated in state-funded OST programs in FY25. As a side note on that, Appendix A, History of State OST Award Allocations, tracks those award amounts in recent fiscal years. In FY26, $15 million was appropriated for OST programs, and of this total, $14 million was specifically for OST, while $1 million was allocated for tutoring initiatives for at-risk students, which marked a large shift in favor of OST at the expense of high-impact tutoring. And in addition to the state support, New Mexico programs also draw on federal funds from the Nita M. Lowy 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant under Title IV Part B of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And so between FY22 and FY25, New Mexico has received between $9.8 million and $10.4 million each year from this federal grant. And according to PED, 9,549 students at 117 school sites participated in these 21st century funded programs in the 24-25 school year. So having discussed funding, I do think it's important to contextualize this spending against the demand that's been demonstrated in the state in recent years by schools, families, and CBOs. And so according to data from PED, the department's FY26 OST Intent to Apply form generated a total request of $30.2 million in funding, 26.4 of which came from school districts and charter schools, and 3.8 coming from community-based organizations. And so this level of interest indicates to us that demand is at least 2 times larger than the state's $14 million OST appropriation for that fiscal year. At this point, I'd like to briefly discuss the purpose and benefits of out-of-school time in service of our shared understanding of this topic. And so research, as I'm sure many of you know, has shown the effectiveness of OST in improving student outcomes, but the importance of OST should not be understood solely through the lens of academic performance. These programs, whether they take place before or after school, on weekends, or in the summer months, support communities with childcare needs, ensure kids have access to nutritious meals, expose students to career and life skills, and engage youth in productive, healthy activities in safe settings. So in short, OST is not just an academic intervention, but rather a wraparound service to help schools and their communities develop well-rounded young adults. On pages 5 and 6, you'll see a list from a 2009 report for Arlington Public Schools in Arlington, Virginia, where the Hanover Research Council, a market research firm, outlined several best practices for designing OST programs based on a review of existing literature. And these best practices emphasize the setting of clear goals, activity variety, complementary, not duplicative OST programming in relation to the content covered during the school day, the importance of sustained student participation, the need for family engagement, proper professional development, and partnerships between multiple entities in a community. Over the course of site visits and interviews, LASC staff concluded the observed programs in our state largely align with these best practices, including the use of clearly defined goals for their programs, partnerships between entities, the setting aside of time for professional development for staff, and the variety in programming offered. And additionally, these activities really were focused on helping students build on the topics they learned throughout the day in engaging ways rather than simply extending the school day. And on the particular point of academics and enrichment and the balance between those two things, Appendix B, OST program type by awards, will break down the programming offered by each state-funded site. And as the table indicates, every state-funded OST site provided enrichment activities in FY25, while 16 out of 27 offered academic supports. On pages 6 and 7, you'll find some examples of how out-of-school time can support academic achievement, improve student attendance, help children develop social-emotional skills, prepare young people for both college and career, provide essential childcare for families, and serve as a bulwark against juvenile crime and risk behaviors such as substance use and alcohol consumption. Now, in developing this brief, it was important to us as staff that we understood how funding appropriated by the legislature translated into the actual programming the students were receiving. And so to do this, LASC staff conducted site visit interviews with a total of 11 providers representing school districts, charter schools, and community-based organizations. And I've seen with the chat, many of the people that I visited throughout this interim are with us today, so I just wanted to thank them so much. I visited programs in Espanola Public Schools, Albuquerque Public Schools, Central Consolidated School District, Mosaic Academy, Taos Municipal Charter, as well as Clovis Schools, Borderland Family Ties down south, Film Prize Junior, the New Mexico State University STEM Outreach Center, Lovington Youth Center, and the Boys and Girls Club of Santa Fe. And so these conversations yielded valuable insights about the broad range of programs developed using state grant funds, as well as those supported through other means, such as federal, local, and private dollars. Now, in the interest of time, I won't be able to discuss in detail the specific programs offered by each of the interviewees, but you will find a discussion of the examples of these programs observed by LASC staff on pages 3, 4, and the top of page 5. Following these site visits and interviews, LASC staff conducted a thematic analysis of responses and identified 4 major themes. First, staffing was the most common use of grant funds. As a result, the $6.5 million appropriated by the legislature in FY25, as well as the $14 million in FY26, was largely dedicated toward compensation for program staff. And that staff could include licensed teachers, school aides, community partners, potentially even older students, depending on the model of the program. Secondly, funding should be consistent and sustained to ensure high-quality programming. Recent fluctuations in funding levels for OST were noted as a barrier to program effectiveness. In particular, community-based organizations have urged continued consideration of specific state funding to support non-school operated OST programs, given the significant role CBOs play in providing OST options for communities in our state. And for several of the CBOs that I spoke with, state OST grant funding accounted for large portions of their annual budget, as much as 75%, making that state support critical for their continued operation in their communities. Thirdly, pairing academics with enrichment is essential for student buy-in. OST should not be used solely to provide academic supports to students, citing concerns about burnout after a lengthy school day, the potential for reduced engagement due to that singular focus, And instead, program staff recommend incorporating enrichment, either through structured experiential learning activities such as cultural enrichment, gardening, hobbies such as chess or STEM experiments or poetry exercises, or through more open-ended formats like free time for kids to play. And last but most certainly not least, individual sites should be given flexibility to determine the programming best suited to their needs. In a state as expansive and diverse as New Mexico, communities need the ability to decide what programs their students need outside of the regular school day. In service of this goal, state funding for OST programs should allow for a reasonable degree of flexibility in implementation. In closing, I'd like to extend again my deepest gratitude to the contributions of the school districts, charter schools, and community-based organizations to this brief. And I want to thank the New Mexico Out of School Time Network for their role as a thought partner on this brief and on out of school time topics more broadly here in New Mexico. Out of school time programs in our state provide students with engaging, safe environments to explore interests, build upon the learning they did in the classroom, and develop skills to thrive long after they leave school. So looking ahead to FY27, LESC staff have prepared 2 recommendations for lawmakers to consider during the 2026 legislative session. To build on the investments made in recent years, the legislature could consider appropriating $20 million in funding for out-of-school time initiatives in FY27 to better account for unmet demand demonstrated by previous interest in grant funding, and funding out of school time and high impact tutoring as separate budget line items to prevent artificial competition for funding between 2 evidence-based practices to support student learning and well-being. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here. Really appreciate all the conversations I got to have in the development of this brief. And I look forward to working with everyone on this call in the months and years ahead as we talk about this important part of our students' educational experience. And with that, I'm open for any questions, Mike.
All right, thank you so much, Connor. I want to thank you for being here and for giving us such a comprehensive view of what you have learned so far. And of course, we so appreciate the policy recommendations. And I also want to thank everybody in this room, because including Lieutenant Governor Javi Morales, because he's taken us 8 years to get to this point where we actually have LASC giving a policy recommendation of 20 million, but also equally important that you see that we shouldn't be competing with tutoring. They're equally important and valuable for our children and families, and to lift up literacy and math, but also create that enrichment space, that should not be in competition. And I also really appreciate your comment on allowing programs to have flexibility in design, so that because we have such a culturally rich state, that we can allow for that to happen at the local level. So those were sort of my highlights, but I do know, I see in the chat here that somebody would like to visit Southern New Mexico at Kids Can Youth Entrepreneur Program, visit Raíces del Saber in Las Cruces, Christina Duncan Heritage Academy. So you're gonna have a list of invitations coming.
Sounds like I'm going to be racking up the miles. Okay.
I know. So so I think people really appreciate your presentation, and of course with the outcome, because you were doing this study to prepare a policy proposal, correct? That was sort of the intent behind it. What was the main intent behind the study, Connor, when you started?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges with out of school time, as we've thought about at the state level, is that it's so expansive and it can be so many different things. And I think that's one of the strengths of out of school time. But when talking about it from a policy lens, that can be challenging. And so what I really wanted to do with this was just helping our lawmakers and all of us involved here in Santa Fe in this conversation really understand, what does the New Mexico out of school time landscape look like right now? What are the successes we've seen? Because we have seen a lot of them throughout the state. There's a lot of great work being done. But what are the gaps that still exist? And what are the barriers that are causing those gaps? And so really just helping our lawmakers as they're preparing for this legislative session and thinking even beyond this legislative session, how do we really continue investing in holistic education that is well-rounded and really supports students, not just in their academics, but also in developing their social emotional skills and who they are as people. And we think that out of school time is a really key part of that. So really just showing what great work is already happening in New Mexico and how we can build upon that work going forward.
So one question, I see one question in the chat too, but in terms of Jen Reinhardt's presentation in America after 3 p.m., how is that helping LASC understand the landscape of out of school time?
Well, I think that, and I should mention that this report was finalized before the America After 3 p.m. report was released, so it doesn't include that information. But I think, I've already had members, we saw during our hearing, one of our members already asked for the America After 3 p.m. report to be sent to them. And so they are aware of this data and the gaps we see in New Mexico and the strong level of support across the state for continued support for out of school time. And so I think to the points that have been made in the chat throughout these presentations today, that is the kind of data that really is going to help people make the case for these sorts of programs, because it's one thing to talk about these programs as a lot of these programs are great for kids because they're great for kids, and like it makes kids feel good about themselves, and that's great. But being able to communicate that need with actual statistics, that's going to be really impactful when talking with people that are making funding decisions.
All right. And I see one question that you did not talk about entrepreneurship, and I think youth entrepreneurship is one of the very specific curriculums that you see in out of school time. So when you did your site visits, did something stand out to you in terms of sites creativity and curriculums that were unique and interesting?
Yeah, and so you're right, I didn't mention it during the presentation there. One of the places that stands out, I think, when I was talking with Borderland Family Ties, they were one of my presenters during the panel last week. And if anyone's curious, there is a recording of that panel presentation on the legislature's website as well. But one of the things that Borderland does is they help students, they call it help students develop side hustles. And so students, for example, learn to be DJs, and then and they help them develop materials to advertise their services for local events and whatnot. And so, and other students get help learning to develop business plans. And I think that though that really does speak to the potential of out of school time as a way to build upon the work and the skills that students develop during the school day and really help them apply that to the real world and see the connection between their schooling and the real world and what they'll be doing later on in life. And so I think that that's definitely an exciting part of it. And like I said at the beginning, I wish I could have had enough time to talk about every little bit about a school time that we have in our state, because there is so many. This doesn't even really scratch the surface. It's not exhaustive, but I know that there are so many great programs that are happening around the state to support students with career exploration, career development, college and career readiness, music, whatever it might be. There's a lot going on.
All right. So before we move on to the panel, I want to encourage everyone to communicate with the New Mexico Finance Committee, because they are the next sort of tier in the hierarchy of listening to these recommendations. So I think if all of you can keep communicating all the great work that's being done, but also the gaps that we see in New Mexico, that will help push, these recommendations from LASC to fruition in our state. Connie, we're going to have a panel to respond to some of the presentations by you and the rest of the presenters this morning. So I'm going to let you go, and thank you again so much for being here with us this morning. We're going to continue working with you. We're looking forward to the session.
Of course. Thank you so much, everybody, and I look forward to this panel.
All right. So I'm going to invite in Sandy Campbell, if he's still with us, because he had a programming he had to attend to today, and we are a bit behind schedule. Sarah Martinez, CEO of Boys and Girls Club in Santa Fe. Wanda Bolgar-Tamez with NMSU and the STEM Innovation Network. Emil Ardelean, I hope I say your name right. He's here representing parents. Tiana James Berlin she's the after school ambassador for New Mexico. For those of you who do not know, she's representing all of us at the national level and at the state level with the Navajo Prep. And is Emil with us, Ian, too? Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't see him in the chat, but Emil, if you're here with an account that's not your name, feel free to raise your hand and we can spotlight you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ian. So I'm going to start with Sandy. Sandy, are you having a whole crew of young people waiting for you up in Taos?
They're about to arrive.
All right.
That's okay though. I have someone intercepting them. They'll go elsewhere until I'm done. So yeah, shall I dive in?
Yeah, so we are here, with all of you to respond to what you just heard, because you are the providers on the ground. We don't have a school district with us, but you are representing pretty much CBOs or universities. So if you can share, what you do and what you think after listening to Connor, Jen, Attorney General, and Lieutenant Governor this morning.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Sandy Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of True Kids One. We are a youth media and technology nonprofit here in Taos, and we're the biggest teen center in the county. Actually, we have about 50 unique kids come here every day after school. Some come here every day after school. Some come here once a week. We also do programs across different classes in when school's in session. So we basically do three main things. And I could talk about this for the next 2 hours, but I'm going to do this in about 10 seconds. We have a media program where we get kids to create media to really build their media literacy. They're growing up suffused in media. Most of them have no idea how any of it works or how people make money out of it. How in the world is Snapchat worth $13 billion? Those kinds of things. And we find by them actually creating their own media, they get a really interesting insight into what that is. We have a big digital health program, which is kind of the flip side of that, helping our teenagers and younger kids really deal with their screen addictions and all the things that come out of that. And ultimately, they are a generation of humanity that needs to have some different skills when it comes to moderating or understanding even their technology intersection. And our third program is our STEM program. And this year, because of a guy who's building a retirement home here, he's a NASA scientist. We have a big space program now. And I'm as surprised as anybody about this, but it's pretty cool actually. And it's happening right now at Taos High. And then the kids are going to come here when they're done. So anyway, I think the major thing that my takeaway is, both from reading Connor's report, from hearing people talk this morning, it feels like there's one massive element missing from the conversation, which is we are all in this community, and I'm sure in yours as well, we're all raising each other's kids. And as a result, what we offer is mentorship. What we offer is friendship. What we offer is being an adult in these kids' lives. We talk about building SEL skills in kids, and of course that's important, but we have to be an SEL organization that can hold these children, that can help them just come down from their school day. We talk about mental health and screens. We talk about all these things regularly. That's important, but we have to help them deal with what that all means. And I didn't say this before, but we really specialize in teenagers age 15 to 22. Obviously, that's not a teenager 22, but same generation, same struggles. So what I mean by all this in terms of our mentorship approach is the kid comes here after school. It's not roll your sleeves up and get going. It's not dive into this class. It's come in, take a breath, have a seat, get some food. We have a kitchen full of food. Go make some food. Go make something for yourself. Relax. I really strongly encourage our kids not to go on their phones right away, but sometimes they need to. Sometimes they've been in school all day long and they need to check in on stuff. And that's totally okay, in my opinion, as long as it doesn't get down the rabbit hole. So, one of the major things for a lot of kids in our community is they don't have adults in their lives or other adults, let's say, than their family who really care about them, who show up for them, who ask them about stuff, who want to know how their grades are going. What are you struggling with in school? So I'll give you one sort of great example of this, and then I'll stop talking. So we have a pair of brothers here. One graduated a couple years ago. He was, still is, one of the smartest teenagers I've ever worked with, just bursting with intelligence, energy. He would get here, and he would launch into whatever was on his mind, intellectually, philosophically, programmatically. He was the leader of our youth council. He was going to all kinds of different meetings. I would go with him. He would often be the smartest one in the room, meeting with elected officials and whoever else. Fantastic kid. He has a huge future. I think he should be the governor of this state eventually, if not a higher office. I mean, that kind of level of teenager, exceptional. So his younger brother comes in here. This kid graduated a couple years ago. His younger brother comes in here a couple years ago, or sorry, a couple months ago, and he's a very different kid. And I realized after talking to him that what he needs is nothing like what his brother needs. He needs me to check in with him about his life. And he'll come in and say, oh, I'm just having a really hard day and I just can't make sense of things and everything's kind of swirling for me. And so I'll start talking to about his screen habits. Are you on your screen at night? Do you check your phone in at night in your parents' room? And getting into that kind of relationship. And again, most of our kids, nobody asks them about their screen behavior. No one asks them about their screen etiquette. Nobody asks them about how that's affecting their lives. So we have that conversation. Then I move into, you getting any exercise these days? You moving your body at all? Well, no, no. And then, and then here's the we're all raising each other's kids move. I know where you live. It's really close by. There's an amazing park close by. Why don't I take you to the park? Put on your headphones. Don't listen to your normal music. Put on some classical music. Go for and walk for an hour. Move your body. And every time he comes in now, which is 2 or 3 times a week, he and I spend 10 minutes on a very real check-in on how he's doing. And then, of course, I want our kids to go into our programs. Of course, I want them to grab a camera. Of course, I want them to do this, this, and this. Of course, I do. But if we don't do that first part, how are you doing? What's going on for you? How can we help you? How can I be a trusted adult in your life that's going to help you be the adjusted, regulated child that, we really want you to be? Oh, we want to pay you some money too for some of the things that you do, especially when you contribute to some of our projects that we're hired to do. That for me feels like the major and the most important thing that we as after school providers can offer our kids. I don't know how to write this down on a paper. I don't know how to get grant funding for that, but that's real. That's without that, everything else doesn't really matter. There's no classes that they can just drop into and run away with. They have to be held. This is a very, very different generation of human beings. And as a consequence, we have to hold them in a very different, much more conscious, much slower way than we might in years previous. So I think I'll just stop on that point right there. I would love to see more attention, more funding, more words spilled on the art of mentorship, the art of connection, because that to me is by far the most important thing that we do. So thank you
Thank you,
very much.
Sandy. Yeah, thank you, Sandy from Taos, True One Kids. Or True Kids One. I got that wrong. So I do want to piggyback on that a little bit. We're hoping as and most to bring some teen centers together in a training for the 47 districts that have a 4-day schedule to talk about exactly that. How do we hold, how do we support, how do we become an adult in that, on that 4th day when the older youth in particular have nowhere to go. So I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation. And like you said, it's hard to put down on paper, but it's definitely evidence-based because the evidence is there. This is what they need. But I want to pass it to Tiana because she kept nodding and throwing up hearts and seemed to really agree with you. So Tiana James Berlin, she's our after school ambassador for the state, and she is with Navajo Prep. So how did you respond to today's presentations and Sandy just now?
So thank you for everything that you shared, Sandy. I really appreciate that. I completely and entirely agree as far as I guess just to say the least. That's one of the things that I feel like is the most important things in out of school time programming, especially in the society that we live in today. Our youth are stuck in their phones. They don't interact with each other very much anymore. They don't have the strongest social skills anymore. And one of my top concerns is the unreal rates of suicide. So especially in Indigenous communities for Native youth, but also New Mexico is rated 5th in the country. So I truly believe that out of school time provides those crucial resources for our youth to make at least 2 positive adult connections. I also think that for New Mexico, especially with Yazi Martinez, it's a space where we can host cultural and even in some spaces, spiritual programming for youth to build those protective factors, whatever their belief system may be. And so, and just finding hope, finding passions, trying new things that they've never experienced before, and being in a safe space to do that. Being in a safe space to be able to express themselves, to be themselves, is one of the most important things we can do in after school or out of school time. And so I know that my experience in out of school time is a major contribution to who I am today, and I truly believe saved my life. And so the people that I was fortunate enough to meet and get to know helped to make me who I am today, and saved me. So from getting engaged in things that weren't healthy for me and kept me out of those spaces, built up my confidence, helped me to learn to have a voice. And so, yeah, I can't express enough how important after school time, out of school time is to me and for our youth. So.
Thank you, Chiana, for sharing. And I know that you also have a vision. I don't know if you mind sharing, or I know we had talked about you wanted to create a network for Native American programs across the country, correct?
I would love to. That's the dream, is that a lot of you may or may not know that there are out of school time networks for I believe all 50 states. And under 21st Century, BIE is a state education agency. So one of the grantees, even though BIE or Bureau of Indian Education, sorry, is not a state technically, but that's how they're categorized under 21st Century. And so I figured if all the states have a after school network for them, why doesn't BIE? And so, or all Indigenous serving out of school time programs. And so that way we can better collaborate with one another to support our youth across the nation, share our cultural teachings. We have youth that are across the nation away from their tribal homelands. And so they can be able to engage with somebody from their community, even if they are far away. And so that's one of and to provide resources. Oh, that's one of the other things, thinking about that, is that I really, and I know that organizations like the Boys and Girls Club have things like this in place, but other organizations that aren't part of a larger, I don't know, structure, we don't necessarily have like onboarding training for our staff. And so I feel like having a resource like that, especially now with 21st Century, I know we're still transitioning, I believe, into the new website, but maybe we have something for New Mexico and we include things like Yazi Martinez and things like that in there. And so, but I think that would be really helpful for some of our programs to be even more effective. Like I would love to have a space we have some interns that work with the local Boys and Girls Club or Brain Camp at Apache Elementary down the street. And I would love for the interns I bring down there, my high school students at Naval Prep, to be able to have some basic training on how to work with youth. And so that I don't have to just find on YouTube or things like that. So that's another resource that I think would be really helpful.
All right. Well, Tiana, thank you so much for sharing that. We do have the new LEAP and most online learning platform. Maybe Ian, you could put that into the chat, the link to that. That does
I will.
offer a free onboarding material. We are running a little bit short of time, so I want to make sure we get to everyone. But you did mention Boys and Girls Club, so I'm going to go to Sarah next.
Thanks, Mai. Yeah, this all has made me feel incredibly lucky to one, be in New Mexico, and also to be, thank you, Tiana, for recognizing Boys and Girls Clubs and the privilege of being under that umbrella and being able to bring on like professional development and things like that. And I'd love to work in the future with the whole community on that, because it's the partnerships here that really make New Mexico unique and leading the way in after school. For me, connecting the presentations, I think from what I took from Jen was kind of the 56% in unmet demands still for after school. We're doing really great. I have a teen center inside the Santa Fe Place Mall. We're serving around 2,000 youth a year. So that's pretty good, but it's not easy. And so it's about funding and how we fund that. New Mexico's excellent at thinking about school agers from 5 to 12 and making that free, but we kind of forget about teens a little bit in that it's the challenges of running a program where like they have a choice. They can go to your program or they can go home. We don't want them to go home because we want them to feel like the connectiveness and everything when they're with their peers, with, as Sandy's mentioned, mentors, and they're getting that mentorship. So working on that, we've done really good. We were able to open our program using ESSER funding. We continue to be a part of like the HB2 grantees, but I think there's still work to do when we talk about those unmet demands. And I think Connor, it's really nice that Connor gets it, that it's not just about academics, it's about enrichment and how we talk about that, how we correlate that with what else we're all doing, because I know everyone else who's on this meeting is doing so much and different things and meeting the different cultural demands of their different demographics. So it's how do we showcase those things and how do we report on those things? But how do we apply for RFPs and things like that with our unique demographics and our unique areas? So a couple of things that we've run into, I think, other Boys and Girls Clubs across the state and other small CBOs, you know, that can't apply for these fundings because they're not big organizations, they're not big entities. You know, part of one of the HB2 like requirements is that, you know, you have to offer health insurance for part-time employees. Well, not all organizations can do those kinds of things. And so just, you know, talking about those things, and I was very happy to see Connor's report. I think like I said, I think he gets it. I think he understands the uniqueness of New Mexico, even though he's only been here 2 years. I'm happy to see he understands that, and he got to go around and see all the amazing things that everyone in the state is doing. I kind of rushed through that so I could give more time to everybody.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sarah, so much. And thank you for always showing up. You've been with me to many advocacy meetings at the state level. So I so appreciate you being in Santa Fe and being available to advocate for everyone. And you have an amazing teen center in the mall, which I think could be a model for not only the state of New Mexico, for the country. So it's been really amazing to see how you built that with state funding, because I know that's been essential for you and your team. I'm gonna go to, before I go to you, one, I want to go to Emil. Are de Leon. I'm not sure, Emil, if I say your name correctly, but are you still with us? I know
Yes, I am.
All right. And where are
Yeah,
you
we're
at? You are
we're
representing parents today. Where are you
pretty
sitting?
close. I'm in my office at AV Incorporated, formerly Blue Halo here in Albuquerque.
All right.
And Dawn asked me if I can participate in this meeting, and I'm happy I did because I found out. Uh, sorry, maybe you don't hear me very well.
No, we can hear you
Right.
good.
Okay. I found out, interesting things about the programs, and I think I was going to write in the chat, but I think uh, a lot of this information should go out um, to schools. Probably flyers they can be given to kids to take home and with links to web pages and whatnot. So may make the community aware of what's going on behind the scenes.
Mhm.
Because you often hear, well, people in Santa Fe they don't do much. They're just getting paid and they don't do their jobs really well. But I think that's not the case. Uh,
And
and
and do you have children in after school?
I do, and I sent a note earlier that we're very grateful for this after-school program. It came for us at the right time, um, because for a while I had my parents living with us, and they were obviously great help. We live not too far from school, from Oñate Elementary, where both my boys. Well, my older one went there, but now he's in 10th grade at El Dorado. The younger one is still there in 5th grade, and last year the program came at the right time because I the previous year I was running from work to get my little one from school and working from home as much as I could. But since the reorganization of the after school program came online, it was a tremendous help. So now I don't worry about having to leave work early to get my boy home and whatnot, and he really enjoys the after school as well.
Yeah, I think you're mentioning a very important point that this is critical for working parents to not only have to run around, but to know that your child is safe and engaged after school.
Exactly.
So what advice would you give to us as a network in terms of communicating with parents? You mentioned schools, but as a parent, what kind of information would you want us to share? Because we could also work with PTA and but what if from what you heard today, what do you think would be interesting to parents to know?
Well, the statistics that was presented was really interesting, and I think people should be made aware of what's going on and how much money is being spent and what exactly is being done. Um, and as I mentioned, probably flyers with some information, because I realize making a brochure is expensive and it's not necessarily very effective. But maybe some flyers with information with links to the websites, and I don't know, maybe phone numbers if parents want to reach out and then discuss things in detail with people working on this, would be probably useful.
Because I do know that, in terms of advocating for funding, the parent voice is really important because we do have providers, we do have some youth engagement in terms of, talking about the need. But I do think we could do a lot better engaging parents in, communicating with decision makers, not only about why it matters, but really also some of the gaps. And but I think your story of how it really helped you is sort of the essential piece, that to have a working economy, we actually need to have after school so that, you can go to work, but also feel that your child is safe. That is sort of the both of those goes hand in hand. Thank you. Did I say your name right? Emil?
Yes.
I did say that's a very famous Swedish name. You know, I'm Norwegian, so Emil was a very it's like a troublemaker from Sweden. You know, he was like a child, like a TV program. So when I saw
Interesting.
Emil, I thought you must be from Sweden, but you were not.
Interesting, because I've met people from Czech Republic or Italy, Belgium. They named Emil.
Yeah, no, it's
So,
it's a very familiar name to me. So thank you so much for joining us on a short notice today. I really appreciated your input. I'm gonna pass it to Wanda. And I didn't even know, Wanda, do I say your last name right? Bulgar Tames? How do you say your
Both of
last
them
name?
is.
Yeah.
It's good. Wanda's great.
Okay. So you are with the NMSU STEM Outreach Center, but also the STEM Innovation Network. So this kind of goes a bit deeper into like a topic or like a focus area within out of school time. But listening to the presenters today, I know you're very familiar with everything that happened today, but was anything new standing out to you that you want to highlight today?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was really glad to hear all of the presentations. And I was really struck by the data that Jen shared of, 3 out of 4 students or maybe 56% or like don't have access still to out of school time programs. And when we look at who is on this call, like we have providers from all over the state, but yet there's still this great need. Um, and so I'm really grateful that we're talking together and thinking about how could we work together to create greater access for students. And Emin said, the idea we need to communicate to parents, but what I am also realizing with the network is just communicating with one another, because there are some amazing resources that are available in the state. And Connor shared in one of his presentations, there was a link to a great map of what's happening, and I really appreciated that map. What I also know is there are other things that are happening beyond that map, right? There's Kids Can down in southern New Mexico. There are cities that are trying to promote after school programs for kids. There's Future Innovators in Hobbs. There are things that are happening, but we're not connecting in a way where we can build from each other's strengths. Like I know Sarah's program in Santa Fe, her teen center is state of the art. Like it's the envy, I think, of all cities to have a program like that. But how do we learn from what Sarah's doing there so that we're not reinventing the wheel in terms of creating high quality teen centers? Tiana also talked about curriculum, and Sandy talked about the need for that connection, right? And I heard some data not too long ago that even college students, the number one thing that keeps them in college is having a person, an adult, in any one of their classes that knows their names and knows them personally and just ask them about their day. Just one person, right? So that connection to an adult, that connection that is highly important. And so what I'm also learning is through the STEM Outreach Center is that need to support teachers in that SEL component. Like we had focused for a really long time and still do on high quality STEM curriculum. But what we realized is we needed to step back and say, where's the SEL piece? Like, how do we get kids just to get to know each other and make friends and feel really connected to that after school program so that they want to be there, that it's not just about the academic learning or the STEM learning, but it's about just the overall well-being of students. And what I know is like people are building some really beautiful, strong curriculum for teachers so that they're not having to come up with all the new ideas themselves. But how do we make that curriculum accessible, right? How do we communicate that? And so that across the state, we can access each other's resources. And so that's the intention of the network, that we have the STEM Innovation Network. And it's brand new. And so I'm going to ask for some grace and getting that off the ground. But I think what Tiana said about connecting people, connecting programs that are serving Native American students is really fantastic. And also the purpose of the network is to connect all the great things that are happening across the state so we can build off of one another, learn from each other, the resources, the strengths that we have, and also just lean in when we say, we don't know how to do this thing. Can somebody help us? Because somebody else has already figured it out. Let's not try to figure it out on ourselves, by ourselves. Sorry, I'm not sure if that was coherent, but I'm really grateful to be here, and I'm really grateful to be connecting with other out-of-school time providers. Like, I hope we just keep doing this. So thank you for bringing us together.
Yeah, thank you, all three of you, for being here with us. And I do think, we struggle with the in-person and versus the virtual. I think that the benefit of the virtual is that we can bring in people from Las Cruces, from Taos, from Santa Fe, from Albuquerque, into the same room. But we do hope to do something in person in the spring. And our annual conference, which is open to everyone, will be March 3rd this year. So mark that on your calendar. It'll be one day out of school time conference in Albuquerque. We haven't had a phone to place conference this year because the funding came in kind of late. So we're going to have a spring into summer conference instead this time. And we're going to focus on summer learning, safety, SEL, teen centers, a variety of things. It'd be great to have some parents there, Emily, so we'll make sure you're invited to that one. And hopefully have another panel out of school time providers talk about what happened at the session, because the session will be over by then. So we'll see what happened with the policy recommendation from Connor's team. Anyway, I want to thank everyone. We did not have time for a Zoom breakout, but this was still amazing, and everybody's participation in the chat. We thank you. We thank all our presenters and speakers. We thank our Lieutenant Governor, the Attorney General, for joining us today. We have two major champions, and of course, Connor with LASC is major also in terms of promoting the need for funding, and just not the funding, but the understanding of why we need out of school time in our state. So thank you again. Our website, www.nmos.org. You can find more information about out of school time in New Mexico. You can also sign up to our newsletter on our website to stay, abreast as to what's happening. There is an RFP right now from PD out for out of school time funding. It's due, I think, sometime in November. And that's the last money that was left with the funding that happened in the last session. I think I don't know how much money is in there. It should be 3.5 million something for expansion out of school time. So that will be the last sort of dip with the funding that was allocated last year, the 14 million. But we're hoping for 20 million this coming session. There, I see a hand, Jill Bratton, there's a hand.
Thanks, Mike.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. I just wanted to say, some of you won't know us. We're the QMC team. We want to help create that network that Wanda is talking about. So we're out visiting at a lot of sites. So if you have a resource that you want to share, or you are a resource, please, I'll put my email in the chat. We are trying to, in our own way, do that kind of networking that Wanda's talking about. And since we do get the privilege to be out in sites all over the state, we do want to contribute as well. So I love, this has been such an amazing webinar, and we would like to do our part as well. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. If you have something, we are compiling a list of resources, and we will continue adding to that. And STEM in New Mexico is on there already. So we'll do our best too. So my email is going in the chat right now.
So Jill, just to clarify, you are with PD, the New Mexico Public Education Department, correct?
Yes, I'm a contractor. So I work for the PED, and I'm in charge. I'm tasked with the wonderful task of getting to go out and visit sites and learn about their programming and help, make sure that there's the other part, making sure that deliverables are met and stuff like that. But the best part is getting to interact, see the kids, work with the staff, and be a source to spread the networking that Wanda was referring to and that everyone is looking for. So please do not hesitate to pop an email over to me, and we're working on getting something up on our website now, Mike. So in addition to complement the work that everyone is doing, right? So
Yeah, thank you for raising your hand, because we do want to thank the Public Education Department for sponsoring this webinar, or this roundtable. We are funded by the PD to do 2 different roundtables externally, and we also are contracted to do roundtables internally in PD. So that would be really interesting to kind of see how out of school time connects between the different bureaus in PD. So PD is taking an active part in making sure that we all come together. So I really want to appreciate the Community Schools Bureau and their effort and their partnership with all of us. And I think that's the last. I do not know if Lieutenant Governor is with us, but I do want to thank him for the partnership and his championship. He always is a host with us in terms of having these roundtables. So we hope to see you in person in March. We will be working closely with you for the session coming up. Stay tuned to more information coming from Most. And again, thank you everyone for showing up this morning bright and early, and have a great weekend. Enjoy the fall colors. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I think you can stop the recording.